They say some houses are alive, not with people, not with pets, but with something older, something that lingers long after names are forgotten. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where folklore breathes, spirits stir, and memory has teeth. Tonight, we travel deep into the mist-soaked rice terraces of northern Vietnam, to a house built of bamboo and bone. A house that was never meant to let go. A house that exhales the names of the dead. A house that breathes at dusk. This is not a story of ghosts that knock. This is a story of a house that remembers, too well and too long. Let the whisper begin. They arrived just before dusk. The road that led to the house wound like a serpent through the steep rice terraces of northern Vietnam, flanked by green steps carved into the mountainside and the soft, hushing breath of wind through the bamboo. The farther they drove, the weaker their phone signals became, until even the car's GPS gave up. The hills whispered in a language only the dead remembered. The house didn't appear on any map, but it waited. It always had. Min was the first to step out of the van, one foot on the gravel, one hand shielding his eyes from the amber glare of the setting sun. He was 38, a school teacher by trade, skeptical by nature. But even his breath caught at the sight before him. The house stood on stilts, legs of weathered wood dug deep into the mountainside, like the roots of something ancient and immovable. Its walls were made of tightly woven bamboo slats, browned by decades of smoke, rain, and memory. The roof sloped down like a hunched back, the shingles cracked and curling at the edges, as if the house had once exhaled something so powerful it broke its own skin. Behind Min, Lien stepped out, holding their daughter An by the hand. An was quiet. She had been quiet the entire trip. Not out of boredom, but stillness. That kind of inner stillness children sometimes carry before a storm. The villagers had warned them. A month ago, when Min's uncle passed away in Hanoi, he'd left a thin, handwritten will, the kind that felt more like a curse than a gift. Min had inherited the family's ancestral house in the northern highlands, a place no one had visited in 2 generations. "You should sell it," the uncle's lawyer had said flatly, "if you can find anyone who will buy it." But curiosity is a stubborn thing, and Min had always been the practical son, the dependable husband. This was just wood and thatch, an old house in a forgotten place. Perhaps they'd renovate it, perhaps rent it to tourists, perhaps nothing would happen at all. But as the sun dipped lower and the sky took on that bruised violet hue of twilight, the house began to change. It started subtly, a soft creaking in the walls, a flex in the bamboo slats, a gentle shift in the stilts beneath the foundation, like a breath being drawn in, and then a low, dry sigh from within the house, the sound of ancient lungs emptying themselves into the silence. Min paused. He looked at Lien. She looked back. They said nothing, but their hands found each other. That night, they lit the old oil lamp in the main room, its flickering light dancing across ancestral portraits still hanging from the beams. Dust lay thick on the shelves, and tiny shrines were tucked into the corners, their incense bowls empty and cracked. There was no electricity, no plumbing, just memory and darkness. An wandered the house barefoot, silent, her eyes wide. At one point, she stopped by a corner of the main wall, pressed her palm against the bamboo slats, and tilted her head. "What is it?" Min asked, crouching beside her. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered something so soft, so breathless, he barely caught it. "Bangwai." Grandmother. Min stiffened. His mother, An's grandmother, had died 10 years ago, buried properly miles away. Her portrait was on the far wall, next to a faded image of a great-grandfather neither Min nor Lien could name. "Did you hear something?" Lien asked gently, coming over. An just nodded. Then she turned back to the wall, pressed her cheek against the bamboo slats, and closed her eyes, as if listening, as if waiting. Later that night, they made beds from old mats and thin blankets. The family curled together on the creaking floorboards. Outside, the wind howled gently over the terraces. But inside the house, it was warm, almost too warm, like breath on the back of your neck, like someone had just walked past you, like the house had just sighed. Min lay awake for hours, staring at the thatched ceiling above. He could hear the faintest creak, inhale, creak, exhale, a rhythm, not mechanical, not wind, something slower, organic, breathing. At dawn, a rooster cried in the valley below, and Lien stirred beside him. An was already awake, crouching in the far corner of the room, drawing in the dust with her finger. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Lien asked groggily. An didn't answer. When Min sat up and walked over, he saw it. She had written a name. Not her own, not his, not anyone alive. A name they recognized only because it had once been whispered at a funeral many years ago. A name of someone whose bones had never been found. By mid-morning, they ventured into the village to buy supplies. The air changed as soon as they crossed the boundary of the rice fields. People stared, not with curiosity, but unease. When Min asked the shopkeeper if he had nails or planks to fix the rotting side stairs, the man said nothing, just looked at him, then said flatly, "You shouldn't stay in that house." Min forced a polite smile. "It's just old." "It's not old, it's remembering." Lien, holding An close, asked what he meant, but the man just lowered his eyes and gave them their change in silence. That night, the house exhaled again. Only this time it was louder, longer. The bamboo walls shifted visibly. Floorboards creaked with no weight on them. And An began to hum. A low, reedy tune, something from a lullaby neither parent could remember teaching her. When asked where she learned it, she simply smiled. "It's what they sing when they come out." "Who, sweetheart?" "The ones in the walls." Min no longer pretended it was the wind. He checked every window, boarded up the shutters, watched the roofline shift ever so slightly as dusk fell again. It was always a dusk. That was when the house seemed to draw breath, as if something unseen inhaled the shadows, as if the house had lungs. And that's when Min remembered what the elder in the village had said, almost in passing. There are houses that protect, and there are houses that remember. Yours is one of the latter. He lit incense that night, placing it before the ancestral altar. He bowed 3 times, whispering prayers his mother had once taught him. Lien followed, though her hands trembled. An just watched. When Min asked her if she wanted to pray too, she shook her head. "They already know I'm here," she said softly. She didn't look scared, just resigned, as if the house had called her by name, and she had answered. At midnight, the lamp flickered and died, and the house took a breath so deep the walls groaned. Min sat up, heart pounding. The air was thick, sweet, almost like decay wrapped in nostalgia. From the floor beside him, An spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's almost full," she said. Min turned. "What is, baby?" She looked at him, eyes glassy in the dark. "The memory." By morning, the walls had settled. The house no longer creaked, no longer sighed. But in its stillness, something felt heavier, as if the breath that had taken the night before had not been released. Min awoke to find Anne sitting cross-legged by the far wall, finger poised above the dusty floor as though mid-sentence. She didn't look up as he approached. "What are you drawing?" "Not drawing," she replied, almost irritated. "Listening." Min crouched beside her. What he saw chilled him. Etched on the dust, just like the day before, were names. Not scribbles, not games. Full Vietnamese names, some written in the old Sino-Vietnamese script, characters no child her age should know. "Who told you these?" Anne blinked. "I told you already, the house." She said it like one might say, the radio. At first, Men wiped them away. He scolded her gently, told her not to joke about the dead. But when she began to write them again, different names this time, and always at dusk, he stopped asking. He just watched as his daughter listened to the floorboards like a priest listens to confession, and wrote. That night, Lien sat up late with her phone trying to look up the names. Some matched old relatives, uncles, aunts, distant cousins long past. Others didn't appear in any family records, and yet they felt familiar. Min retrieved the family altar book, an old red cloth-bound registry stored in a tin box under the stairs. Its pages were yellowed, its ink faded, but the lineage was clear. He flipped through it slowly, with trembling fingers, and there it was. One of the names Anne had written that very morning, Nguyen Chi Hoa, a cousin of Min's grandmother. Died during the famine, never married, never buried. No photo, just a name, and now a whisper. That night, Min couldn't sleep. At one point, he rolled onto his side and noticed the wooden floor beneath their mats was warm. Not like heat from sunlight. No, this warmth was subtle, pulsing, like the warmth of skin, like the chest of a sleeping animal. He placed his palm flat against it. The wood throbbed, ever so faintly, once every few seconds. A heartbeat, or a breath. He pulled his hand away. The next day, Anne refused to eat. She said her stomach hurt, that her chest felt tight. She lay by the altar and mumbled to herself, eyes unfocused. "She's not sick," Lian said quietly. "It's something else." Min didn't answer. He had started to feel it too. The heaviness in his chest, the fatigue that clung like wet clothes, the feeling of sinking. That evening, a neighbor from the next hamlet, a hunched man named Ong Ting, stopped by. He stood 10 feet from the steps, never approaching. Min greeted him politely, invited him in. The old man did not smile. "I won't enter that house, but I will speak." Min hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." The old man cleared his throat, eyes never leaving the house. "We call it a Nha Thua, not a normal Nha San like the others. This one, it breathes." Len, listening from the porch, stiffened. "Why does it breathe?" The man's face darkened. "Because it remembers, too much. It was built atop bones that were never honored. Bodies washed down the river during war, children buried too shallow, spirits that cling to the memory of family and rot into the wood. He pointed at the floorboards with a trembling hand. If it breathes in too deep, it will not let you go. Min asked what could be done. The man shook his head. If the dead were never named, never sent off, the house will name them itself through whoever is listening. His eyes drifted toward Anne. She sat on the porch, legs swinging, humming to herself. The old man whispered, almost to himself, "It always finds the children first." That night, Min refused to sleep. He kept a small notebook beside him, writing down each sound the house made, each exhale, each creak. At precisely 11:47 p.m., Anne sat up, still asleep or close to it. She walked to the center of the room, knelt, and began to tap the floor with her palm. 5 taps. Pause. 4 more. Another pause. Then she placed her cheek on the wood and whispered a name. Tran Van Pok. Min gasped. That was his father's name. Buried in the city. Full funeral. Incense. Prayers. Everything done right. "Anne," he whispered, "how do you know that name?" She didn't respond, just stared into the darkness, her face unreadable. "He's still here," she said softly. "He says it wasn't enough." By morning, Min had dark circles under his eyes. Lien was vomiting. And Anne was drawing again. This time, not just names, but faces. Crumpled faces, sunken cheeks, eyes made of concentric black rings. Dozens of them, all with mouths open as if gasping. He flipped through the pages, stomach tight. And on the last one, a drawing of their stilt house with rib cage-like stilts, and inside 3 tiny stick figures curled in fetal positions, drawn beneath the floor. Not inside the house, beneath it. Buried, remembered, waiting. That afternoon, men began to hear the names too. Not spoken aloud, not in Anne's voice, but in the way the wind moved through the slats, in the dry rattle of the roof beams, in the aching silence between dusk and full dark. Nguyen, Tran, Le. The syllables were there, faint, brittle, not quite sound, but unmistakably spoken. He lifted one of the floorboards in the back room, just one, just to look. And what he found was not a grave, not exactly, but soil, black, sticky, and wet with condensation. And something else. A scrap of cloth, red and gold, frayed at the edges, wrapped around a broken wooden spoon, like a child's offering or a forgotten talisman. It crumbled in his hands. That evening, the breathing returned. Longer this time, slower. The whole house expanded slightly, like lungs swelling with grief. The bamboo walls bowed outward with the force of it, then recoiled. The windows shuttered. Lien wept in silence. Min held her hand. Anne slept with a smile on her face. At midnight, the floor creaked again, slowly, rhythmically, not from footsteps, but from within. Min got down on all fours and placed his ear to the wood. And he heard it. Not just breathing, but whispers. Dozens of them, all overlapping, all calling out names, some familiar, some foreign, some lost to time. And beneath it all, a rhythm, not of breathing, but of chanting. Nyo tren di, nyo tren di. Remember the name. Remember the name.
In the days that followed, the air in the house grew heavier, not with smoke,
not with dust, but with presence. It clung to their clothes, seeped into their skin, pressed into their lungs like an invisible hand that never stopped squeezing. The whispers returned every dusk, not words, not exactly, but syllables that didn't belong in wind. A rustling that sounded too intentional, like a language just below understanding, one that bypassed thought and went straight to blood memory. Min stopped questioning it. So did Lian. Because the moment you ask if you're going mad, you already know the answer. They tried to clean the house. They swept, they dusted, they opened windows. They even burned white sage sticks Min's cousin had mailed from overseas. But the walls rejected it. The house wheezed when the smoke hit the altar. The bamboo crackled in ways no fire had touched. And the moment the scent began to fade, the breathing came back stronger, as if the house had held its breath in protest, then exhaled through the floorboards in a low, grating moan. Min began to call it the Nya Te in private. He whispered it to himself under his breath. He wrote it at the top of his journal, Nya Te, the breathing house. He even asked the village elder about it. They met near the rice paddies. No one else would speak to him now. Nya Te isn't just a haunted house. It's a place where memory fuses with wood, a place that has absorbed too much grief to stay silent. Min asked him what to do. The man looked at the hills. Nothing. That's not an answer, Min said. It is, the elder replied softly, just not the one you want. That night, Anne stopped speaking altogether. She sat beneath the altar with a candle and a piece of charcoal, drawing circles, overlapping circles, concentric, deep black grooves. The shapes were hypnotic. Min reached for the drawing and froze, because he had seen it before. At his grandmother's funeral, there had been a cloth spread across the offering table, hand-stitched with the same shapes, symbols meant to represent the cycle of life, death, and ancestral return. The family had burned it afterwards. It was never supposed to be recreated. When Lian asked Anne where she had seen those patterns, the girl answered without looking up. I didn't see it. The house showed me. That same evening, Min found something strange inside the pantry. A slit in the bamboo wall, like a knife had carved through it from the inside. Inside the slit, a single human tooth, yellowed, cracked, tiny, like a child's. He threw it into the woods behind the house, buried it under a rock. By morning, it was back in the pantry. The house, it seemed, had begun offering things back. A shard of pottery appeared in the kitchen sink. A torn piece of black funeral cloth fluttered down from the attic rafters, and a long, brittle braid of gray hair showed up in Anne's pillowcase. Each object seemed to pulse with quiet memory, not evil, but dense, oppressive, grieving. As though the house wasn't trying to haunt them, it was trying to speak. Min began researching ancient rites, burial practices, Vietnamese animism. He stayed up late reading through threads on Vietnamese spirit houses, ancestral altars, and cursed land. One word kept surfacing: Nhop Ling, spirit infusion. The belief that an object or a structure could become spiritually charged if it absorbed too much death, pain, or memory. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about living memory embedded into matter. Some called them sacred. Others called them cursed. Min read one line that made his hands go cold. If a house remembers you too strongly,
It may try to keep you, not out of cruelty, but out of grief. The next day, Min returned to the attic. Behind a wall panel, he found an old wooden trunk. Inside, incense ash, half-burned Jaws paper, a faded family tree, and a tightly wrapped linen bundle sealed with red wax. He unwrapped it. Inside were bones. Not full skeletons, but fragments, a child's femur, a woman's rib, teeth, loose and scattered like dice, all wrapped in rotting silk. Lian gasped when she saw it. She wanted to burn it, bury it, throw it in the river. But Min stopped her. "Not yet," he said. "We need to know who they were." Lian asked the obvious question. "How do you ask that?" They both turned to Anne. That night, she spoke again, but it wasn't her voice. Her lips moved, but the tone was deeper, older, the cadence of someone far removed from time. She said 4 names, all from the lineage book, all women who died under unusual circumstances, 2 during childbirth, 1 from poisoning, 1 never confirmed. Each of them had lived and died in this house. None of them had been given full burial rites. One of them was Anne's great-great-grandmother. Min knew then they had been left behind. Their bodies, their names, their spirits. Not forgotten, but remembered incorrectly, incomplete. He spoke with the elder again. The old man sighed. "You must make it right," he said, "but the house has rules. It must accept the apology." Min asked how. "Begin with incense," the elder said. "Real incense. Make it by hand. No store-bought sticks." "Then what?" Min asked. "Then you ask the house to tell you the truth." That evening, they built a new altar. They crushed herbs, rolled incense paste into coils, burned offerings while kneeling on the bamboo floor. Min read every name from the lineage book. Lian poured tea into the wood. Anne lit the incense with shaking hands. The smoke curled slowly, rising not straight, but downward, like it wanted to be swallowed by the floor. And for the first time in days, the house didn't breathe. The silence was worse. Not relief, but the kind of silence that comes after someone inhales and holds it. Waiting. Watching. That night, Min dreamed of drowning in smoke. Lian dreamed of giving birth to a baby with no face. Anne dreamed of a staircase descending into the ground, lined with portraits of people she had not met but knew. When they awoke, the bamboo slats near the kitchen had warped, bulging outward, splintering slightly, as if the house had inhaled too hard, and something inside wanted out. It began with a name that wasn't in the book, not on the family tree, not in the temple records, not even in the stories passed down during ancestral rites. But Anne wrote it anyway. She etched it into the dust with her thumb while humming softly. Nguyen Ti Lan. Ming paused when he saw it. "Who is that?" Anne didn't look up. "She's under the house." Ming flipped through the altar book again, line by line. No mention of anyone named Lan. Lien searched through her grandmother's old letters and family funeral photos. Still nothing. It was as if the woman had been erased. That evening, the house breathed deeper than ever before. Not one slow inhale, but 3, each longer than the last, each ending in a low guttural groan through the rafters. The walls swelled, the floor bent. A teacup fell from a shelf and shattered without touch. And An whispered, "She's remembering now." Ming returned to the elder one last time. He didn't ask permission to enter. He sat on the old man's porch like a desperate son. "I need to know," he said. "Who is Lan?" The elder didn't speak right away. Then, after a long silence, he murmured, "There was a girl, young, unmarried, pregnant. Her father locked her inside the house until she gave birth and died." Ming's mouth went dry. "That was here?" "Yes." "What happened to her?" The elder's eyes clouded. "They buried her in the wrong season. No funeral, no prayers. The child was taken. The girl's name was forbidden." "Why?" "Because she brought shame." Ming drove home in silence. Rain had started to fall, slow, thick drops that hit the windshield like fingers. The road shimmered under the headlights, and the mountains breathed fog. When he returned to the house, An was already awake, sitting in the doorway, barefoot, soaking wet, her dress clinging to her skin. She saw her. Ming knelt beside her. "Where?" An pointed at the floorboards. "She's lying down, but her mouth is open." That night, Ming dreamed of a young woman trapped in a room without windows. She pounded the walls, screamed. No one answered. And then, she simply stopped screaming. She simply lay down, closed her eyes, and waited to be forgotten. The next morning, Ming took a shovel and went beneath the house. The earth was soft, unnaturally so. Dark mud clung to his boots like memory. The stilts groaned as he moved, as if they knew. 2 feet deep, his shovel struck silk. Red, tattered, soaked. He dropped to his knees and pulled it up. Inside the bundle was a small wooden comb, a lock of braided black hair, and a piece of parchment so faded it flaked to the touch. A name had once been written there. He could still make out the first letter, L. They burned joss paper that night, not to an ancestor, but to a stranger who had been family once and was severed from the bloodline. Yen wept as she poured tea over the bundle. Ming held An's hand as she whispered, "We remember you now." The flame crackled, and for a moment the house groaned, not from breath, but from release. A plank near the hearth split clean down the center, not violently, but like something had finally been let go. But that peace didn't last, because memory is not just grief, it is debt. 2 days later, the breathing returned, harsher, deeper, labored, as if the house had opened lungs long sealed. Lien's fingers turned gray at the tips. Ming began waking with blood in his mouth. An slept more and more, her body cold to the touch. At first, Ming thought honoring Lan had brought wrath, but that wasn't it. He understood now. Lan was not the cause. She was the beginning, the first to be forgotten. And when you forget one, you forget many. And the house remembers them all. That night, An stood in the middle of the room with her arms raised, her eyes rolled back, her feet bare and bleeding. She whispered a single phrase over and over, "Bring them in, bring them in, bring them in." Ming collapsed in the kitchen that night, his body suddenly heavy, as if the floor was pulling him down. He tried to rise, but the wood had grown warm again, sticky. It clung to him. Yen dragged him away, screaming, and from beneath the floorboards came the sound of weeping. Dozens of voices, all female, all forgotten. That was when the realization struck Ming with the force of a curse. This was not a haunted house, it was a cradle. Of memory, of grief, of names never spoken. And now, through On, it had found a voice. That voice would not stop until every soul had been remembered. But Ming feared the cost, because the longer they stayed, the more they forgot the sound of their own names.
The house was hungry now. It no longer waited for dusk. It breathed at all hours, shallow in the morning, slow and deliberate at noon, deep and sorrowful by nightfall. And when it exhaled, the walls shivered like flesh, the floors moaned like bones, and the air tasted faintly of ash. Min no longer left the property. He kept vigil at the altar. He burned incense. He prayed, not out of faith, but desperation. But the smoke from the incense curled upward, only to drift sideways, as if pushed away, like the house was rejecting it. Lin tried to place offerings on the spirit shelf: fruit, rice, boiled chicken, even sweet tea. But each offering spoiled within hours. Mangoes blackened, bananas split and rotted, tea turned to thick, congealed sludge, and no matter how many times she wiped the shelf clean, the smell lingered, a smell of wet wood, of old teeth, of forgotten mouths. It was On who finally said it out loud. "They can't eat. They don't have mouths anymore." Min turned to her, stunned. "Who?" "The ones under the floor." She didn't blink as she said it. "They're not asking for food. They're asking for memory." That night the house made a new sound, not breath, not groans, but chewing, soft, wet, rhythmic, as if hundreds of invisible jaws were grinding something just beneath the floorboards. Min tore up 3 panels that night, hand bleeding from the nails. He found nothing, no vermin, no rot, no bones, just damp earth and silence, until he put the panels back, and then once more, chewing. On began to change. She no longer responded to her name. She spoke in fragments, half-sentences that belonged to other times, other people. "The midwife never came. I buried my son under the hearth. She said the river would carry me away, but it didn't. We're still here." She would say these things while staring at the corners of the room, or while drawing in the dust with her finger. Circles again, always circles. Min asked the village elder what it meant. The man refused to speak this time, only crossed his arms and said, "The house is opening its mouth. Your child is the tongue." Then he turned away. That night, Lien had a nightmare. She dreamt she was inside the house alone. The walls were slick with breath. Her footsteps echoed. The altar was gone. The furniture gone. Nothing remained but a wide black mouth on the floor, ringed in teeth made of wood, and something beneath it, whispering, "Feed me what was never named." She awoke gasping and vomiting mud, real mud, dark, gritty earth. It clung to her lips and smelled like old incense and mildew. Min held her all night. They didn't speak, because there were no words for this anymore. By morning, An had vanished, not from the house, but from herself. She sat in the attic rocking slowly, arms wrapped around her knees. Her lips moved constantly, but no sound came out. When Min sat beside her, he heard it, barely. The names, always the names, as if her tongue were writing them in the air. Min lit candles at every corner of the house that night. He burned herbs, he rang a bell, he shouted the names of every ancestor he could remember, voice raw with pleading. The house responded,
by holding its breath. Everything went still. Even An froze mid-rock. Lean stood in a doorway whispering, "It's listening." Then, just as suddenly, the roof cracked. A single bamboo beam split down the middle with a sharp, wet pop, and a downpour of old soot and dead insects rained into the room. They screamed, but An just smiled. Min tore up 3 panels that night, hand bleeding from the nails. He found nothing, no vermin, no rot, no bones, just damp earth and silence, until he put the panels back, and then once more, chewing. Min collapsed at the altar, sobbing. "We've done everything," he muttered. "Prayers, offerings, rituals. What else do you want from us?" His voice echoed through the house like a cry in a temple long abandoned. And from the far corner of the room came a single hoarse whisper. "All of it." The sound did not come from An, or Lean, or Min. It came from the floor. They left the offerings untouched that night. They left the altar unlit. They didn't speak, didn't breathe too loud. They simply lay together on the floor, waiting for morning. But it never really came, because now the house breathed at dawn too, and in every breath it was learning how to speak.
The first time it happened, Min thought he was dreaming. He felt the floor shift beneath him, subtly, like a ripple in shallow water. Then warmth, a rising heat from the bamboo slats that spread across his back like breath. The kind of warmth that doesn't comfort, but claims. He tried to sit up, but the floor held him. His hands slipped as if the grain had turned slick. The wood softened. It felt like flesh beneath fabric. And then, just before he tore himself upright, he heard it. "Stay. You are remembered." He awoke gasping, shirt damp, mouth full of the coppery taste of old blood. Beside him, Lien slept, curled away from him, whimpering in her sleep. An was gone. Not gone from the house, gone from herself. She stood by the window, forehead pressed against the bamboo frame, unmoving, whispering, not to the house, with it. Their voices overlapped now, her breath sinking with the exhale of the walls. Men could not tell where she ended and the house began. Later that morning, he checked the floor where he'd felt the heat. One of the bamboo slats had warped, bowed slightly downward as if it had sagged under weight. The others around it were soft, too soft. He pressed his palm against them. They gave slightly, not like wood, like wet cloth stretched over a shallow grave. He began to hear it at night, a low sucking sound deep under the house, like the land itself was gulping air, like something long buried was breathing in reverse, drawing memory back into itself, drawing them down with it. That night, Lien's legs went numb. She awoke screaming, unable to feel anything below her knees. He lifted the blanket. Her feet were buried. Not deep, only an inch or two, but the floor had opened up. The slats had separated like lips, and her ankles had sunk into the mud below. He pulled her free with both hands, heart pounding. The house groaned in protest, its bamboo ribs shuddering. An did not react. She sat in the corner of the room, eyes glazed, hands muddy. Min yelled her name. She blinked once, then whispered, "It's not swallowing us. It's remembering where we go." In the following days, the boundaries of the house began to change. Corners stretched, Door frames narrowed. The kitchen now felt longer at night, the walk to the stove taking 5 more steps than during the day. The attic ceiling bowed lower. The steps outside curved where they had once been straight. It was subtle, but constant, as though the house was reshaping itself around its occupants, wrapping them in itself like a tomb. Min installed cameras, desperate to capture something he could understand. But every morning, the memory cards were blank, footage wiped, batteries drained. The house did not want to be seen, only heard. On the 5th day, An collapsed mid-step. Min caught her before she hit the floor, but not fast enough. The wood beneath her split open, and her arms sunk into the gap up to the elbow. She didn't scream, didn't struggle, just turned to Min and whispered, "It's okay, Papa. It's remembering me." He had to wrench her free, skin torn, elbow bruised. But no panic, no fear, only surrender. That night, Lien tried to leave. She packed a single bag, slung on over her shoulder, and stepped out into the night air. The mist outside was thick, white as steamed rice, pressing against her skin like wet cloth. But when she reached the gate, she stopped. Not because something blocked her, but because the house exhaled. Not loudly, just deeply. A slow, low breath that rolled down the mountain like thunder too tired to strike. And in that moment, she forgot. Forgot why she was leaving. Forgot where the road went. Forgot what was wrong. She turned around and walked back in. Min watched from the window, lips trembling. The door opened for her. It always did. The house wanted them inside. It had learned how to keep them, not by force, but by memory. It made sure they remembered the warmth, the smells, the softness of bamboo underfoot, the songs they'd once heard their grandparents hum, even if those songs never existed. The floorboards swelled again that night. Min no longer slept. He sat by the fireplace with a hammer in hand, as if that mattered, watching the floor breathe like a beast curled beneath a thin blanket. An crawled to him just before dawn. She laid her head in his lap and whispered, "There's no bottom, Papa. It just keeps going." He stroked her hair. "What does?" She looked up at him with eyes too old for her small face. "The memory." That evening, Lien began to rot. It started with her breath, sweet but wrong, like fruit just past ripe. Then her fingers, skin paling, tips blackening. She said it was frostbite, but it wasn't cold. Her nail beds loosened, flesh puckered. Men begged her to leave with him, go to the hospital. But she stared at him and said, "I don't think I belong anywhere else now." Then she laughed, a short, sad laugh. "I think the house is building me back into itself." The next day, Min tried to board up the windows, to seal them in, or maybe to keep it out. But the nails kept bending, wood split in strange places, and by the time he finished, the boards had curved themselves open again, like lungs. Inhale, exhale. He began to notice that the light no longer changed. No real sunrise, no real sunset, just a long, unbroken dusk that settled over the house like gauze. And in that strange half-light, shadows moved. Not fast, not sharp, just persistent.
always near the corners, always watching. One evening, while kneeling at the altar, Min felt something brush his foot. He looked down. A hand, thin, gray, child-sized, reaching up through the floor, palm open, waiting. He didn't scream. He simply bowed his head and whispered, "I remember you." The hand withdrew, and the floor creaked once, gently. Later that night, An said something that made the air freeze. "We're not living in the house anymore." Min turned to her. "Then where are we?" She smiled faintly. "We're part of it now."
The house had begun to rearrange time. There were no more mornings, only returns. The same day, the same hour, the same half-light dripping through the slats like old memory. Min would wake to the same bird call outside, even though there were no birds. The same drip in the corner of the roof, though no water ever touched the floor. The same creak in the same step at the same moment each dusk. As if the house was playing back a tape of life, again and again. And somewhere beneath the repetition, a truth rotted. Lian no longer left her corner of the room. She sat beside the altar, fingers stained black, her voice too soft to follow. She repeated names over and over. Names men didn't know. Names he couldn't trace. Names that had never been written down, but now clung to Lian's lips like mold. He asked her where they came from. She whispered, "They're old. The house kept them." Min's notebook, once filled with observations, rituals, prayers, was now covered in unfamiliar handwriting. Names in loops he didn't write, drawings of faces that didn't belong to anyone living, maps of the house drawn as lungs, each floorboard labeled like a rib, each hallway curved like a windpipe. At the center, a room that did not exist, the memory chamber. An had drawn it one night while sleepwalking. She said she'd been there. He asked her what it looked like. She answered slowly, voice thin. "There's no floor in that room, only a pit, and the pit hums like it's dreaming." "What's in the pit?" An smiled. "Us." Min went to the attic, desperate for answers. The photos were still there, dusty, browned, curling with age. But now the faces had changed. His grandmother's eyes were gone, replaced with empty, ink-black voids. His father's mouth had vanished. In the photo of his great-uncle, a second shadow stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, a face blurred like fog in a broken mirror. He flipped to the back. Each photo now had words scrawled behind them. Not captions, not names, but sentences. Still beneath, "Not yet forgiven. We never left. Let us in." When men showed the photos to Lian, she didn't blink. She simply traced a finger over one of the blank faces and whispered, "They don't want us to look at them. They want us to be them." That night, the house began to echo, not with sound, but with memory. Every word spoken inside was repeated hours later. You could be in the kitchen at dusk and suddenly hear yourself crying from earlier that morning, or be in the attic and hear An's lullaby from 2 nights ago, whispered by the walls. The house had become a recorder, a living archive of grief, and it would not let go of anything.
Min wrote a single sentence in his notebook that night. "This house doesn't haunt us, it remembers harder than we do." The next morning, Lian was gone. Not missing, not dead. Gone in a way Min could still feel her. Her body had collapsed in the corner, limp and oddly empty, like her soul had been exhaled. But her presence lingered. In the whisper behind the curtain, in the way the floor creaked when no one walked, in the scent of her hair near the altar. He tried to cry, but the house didn't allow it. It absorbed grief too quickly, turned it into breath, then let it out again through the daughter. On was now the echo chamber. She repeated things before they happened, things Min had not yet said. She'd look at him and whisper, "Don't ask," just as he opened his mouth, or murmur, "It's under the step," just before he stepped on a loose nail. He didn't laugh anymore, only blinked slowly, like memory was heavy inside her head. Then one night, the house began to hum. A deep, low-frequency vibration that shook the walls but made no sound to the ear. Min felt it in his teeth, in his chest, in the marrow of his spine. The entire structure, the stilts, the slats, the roof, was vibrating with memory, and An sat in the center of it, eyes rolled back, lips moving with the rhythm of the hum. "The memory is full," she whispered. "What happens when it's full?" Min asked. She smiled. "Then it feeds." That night, Min found a piece of himself missing. Not physically, not visibly, but when he stared at his own reflection in the window pane. He couldn't remember his own birthday, then his father's name, then the smell of his mother's perfume. They were gone, eaten, sunk into the floor. He fell to his knees, screaming, not in fear, but in loss. The house was replacing him. Later that night, he awoke to find his own photograph in the altar drawer. It was old, black and white, faded, but it was him, younger, smiling, eyes bright, and below it a caption written in the same unfamiliar hand that had overtaken his journal. Lived, forgot, returned. The house remembered too well, and it no longer cared who wanted to forget. The house could no longer be denied. Its presence had crossed into ritual, into breath, into blood. It didn't just surround them, it wore them. Ming no longer recognized the sound of his own footsteps. The floor echoed differently now. Each step was slower, muffled, like walking across lungs filled with mud. Even when he spoke, his voice returned to him warped, delayed, like the house was translating what he said into memory. And Anne, she barely slept now. Her eyes stayed open long into the night, not because of fear, but because she claimed she could hear the ones beneath rehearsing names in her dreams. "They're practicing for the ritual," she whispered. "What ritual?" Ming asked. She smiled faintly, eyes unfocused. "The one that ends forgetting." That was when Ming knew they could not wait any longer. They needed a shaman, someone who knew the old ways, someone whose voice could reach deeper than the roots of the stilts, deeper than the hunger in the floor. He traveled down the mountain, into a neighboring village where cell service flickered like a candle in wind. He asked, he begged, he offered money. Most said no. Some wouldn't even look at him. Only one said yes. She was old, her back hunched like bent reed, eyes milk white, cataracted, but her fingers were strong, carved by years of incense and bone powder. She never gave her name, only nodded and said, "The house has been calling for a long time. You just finally answered." That night, she came with bells, bowls, smoke, and silence. She entered the house barefoot. Ming tried to speak, but she raised one hand, and the words caught in his throat. Even the house seemed to pause. The breathing slowed. The walls held their inhale. The roof held its groan. And for the first time in weeks, the air tightened like something ancient was listening. She knelt in the center of the main room. She placed a small wooden bowl on the floor, filled it with ashes, and pricked her own finger. One drop of blood. Then she chanted. The words were old, older than family, older than language. The house responded with a low vibration, like a growl rising from beneath the earth. Still she chanted. Then the wind came, not from outside, from within. The windows rattled. The incense curled sideways as if pushed by a breath that had no lungs. And Anne began to laugh, not like a child, like a choir. Her voice split, became many, each tone deeper than the last, each word a name Ming had never taught her. We are the bones beneath the altar. We are the teeth buried in the walls. We are the lips that once called for prayer and were met with silence. The shaman's eyes widened. She stood, fast for someone so old. She threw salt into the corners, lit another stick, rang the bell. You were never given rest, but now I give you name. Now I give you breath. Now I give you exit. But the house shuddered violently. A sound cracked through the floorboards like a spine breaking. The ceiling bowed. The altar burst into flame. The bells exploded in her hands. The woman screamed, and the fire extinguished itself without smoke. Then, silence. The shaman fell to her knees. Ming rushed forward, but she pushed him away. Her voice was hoarse. It doesn't want release. She looked to the ceiling. It doesn't want freedom. Then, with tears in her eyes, she whispered, It wants reunion. She left that night, refusing to take a single dong of payment. Outside the house, before stepping onto the path, she turned back to Ming and said, It's not your house anymore. Then paused, as if realizing something. Maybe it never was. Inside, Anne sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing circles again, but this time her fingers bled and she didn't notice. Ming approached, gently cupping her hands. Why are you hurting yourself? She looked up with a calmness that chilled him more than any scream. They need shapes to live in. The house only remembers us if we're shaped correctly. That night, Ming found a small pile of teeth beneath his pillow. Human, old, baby-sized. He checked Anne's mouth in a panic. None were missing. They weren't hers. They had simply returned. The next morning, Liane spoke her first words in 2 days. Her voice was ragged, like it had traveled back from too far away. She said, There is no ritual, only memory, and memory wants to be full. She looked at Ming, her eyes unfocused. You can't offer what was never buried. You can't bury what was never forgiven. She touched his cheek gently. You have to give it something it can't take. Ming didn't sleep that night. He sat at the center of the house, surrounded by candles and offerings. He didn't chant. He didn't pray. He just whispered every story he could remember, about his childhood, about his parents, about the first time Anne said "Ba." He offered memory, real ones, living ones. And the house grew still. For a moment, he believed it had worked. The walls didn't breathe, the floor didn't swell, the air felt empty, too empty. Then Anne screamed, and the floor beneath her opened, not broke, not cracked, opened, like a mouth. Ming reached for her, but she was already halfway in, her small body pulled downward into the wood like water soaking into dry rice. Her eyes rolled back, her mouth moved soundlessly. Ming screamed her name, but the house exhaled again, hard, and the candles went out.
There was no scream, no shatter, no final moment of resistance. An was simply gone. One moment, half in the light, the next folded into the floor like water absorbed into dry roots. The bamboo slats knitted back together behind her, silent, breathless. Min pounded the floor with both fists, sobbing, calling her name again and again, but it was not heard, not here, because the house had begun its second breath. The first had been subtle, a slow, tentative inhale, a remembering, but this was different. The house was now certain. It had claimed, it had fed, and now it expected more. Min and Lien searched every inch of the home. They tore open floorboards, ripped wall panels from the inner frame, entered the attic, crawled beneath the stilts. Every time Min called out for An, he was met not with silence, but echoes. Echoes of her voice, her laughter, her whispers. But none of them were real. They came before his voice, not after, as if the house was answering on her behalf, or worse, anticipating him. By morning, Lien was curled beneath the altar, whispering to herself. Her skin had grown pale, her lips chapped and bleeding. She no longer blinked. Min crouched beside her. "Where is she?" Lien turned her head slowly, her gaze not quite reaching his. "Where the forgotten go." "And where is that?" "Beneath memory." Min screamed into the walls. He screamed until his voice cracked, until his breath came in gasps, until his fists bled. But the house remained calm. It pulsed, not with violence, but expectation. It had taken the first, now it was waiting for the second, the next inhale, the next offering. Because this was no longer a place of grief. It was a rhythm, a breathing pattern as old as burial, as deep as ancestral debt. That night, Min lay alone in the room where An had vanished. He did not light candles. He did not burn incense. He simply lay still, listening. At first, only the usual sounds came. The bamboo creaking in its old bones, the occasional shift in the stilts. But then the breath returned, slow, deep, measured, and then a voice, faint, from beneath. "Ba." Min bolted upright. It was her, faint but unmistakable. "Ba, it's warm down here." He dropped to his knees, pressed his ear to the floor. "An, are you there?" No response, just breath. Like the house was exhaling her voice back to him, softened, worn thin by layers of memory. Then something rose from beneath the floorboards. Not her body, not a hand. A note, folded from brittle yellow paper, sliding up through the slats as if carried on breath. Min opened it with shaking fingers. There were only 3 words. "Remember me fully." He did,
He tried. He closed his eyes and summoned everything he had left. The first time she kicked in the womb, the sound she made the first time she saw snow, the way she whispered "Papa" when afraid of the dark. He poured it out, every memory, every detail, every moment. And the house paused. It did not breathe. It did not groan. It just held its second breath, like it was tasting what he had offered. But it wasn't enough, because memory was never enough for this house. It didn't want remembrance. It wanted return. By morning, Liane was gone too. No trace, just her clothes folded neatly at the foot of the altar, and a trail of black fingerprints leading to the bamboo wall and vanishing. Min didn't scream this time. He sat in silence, palms on the floor, listening, waiting. He knew what was coming. The second breath was almost complete, and when the house exhaled next, it would do so with his name on its tongue.
Dusk had changed. It was no longer a time of transition, no longer a soft veil between light and dark. Now it was a threshold, a doorway through which memory walked, barefoot, voiceless, insistent. And Min? He no longer feared it, because he no longer remembered what it was like to live outside it. The sun would dip below the hills, and the bamboo walls would begin to move. Not creak, not groan, but flex, as if stretching before speech, as if preparing to speak through him. He didn't sleep anymore. Sleep was too shallow now, too fragile. He simply sat by the altar where the hearth, where the edge of Anne's empty bed, and listened. The voices began softly, whispers between the cracks of the bamboo, murmurs stitched between floorboards. Not random, not wind, but voices of the known. His father, his mother, cousins long buried, even Liane, soft as a prayer in the back of his skull. They never said full sentences, only fragments, as though the house had only kept pieces of them. Don't close the window. It still hurts under the tree. Where did you leave my shoes? I was never warm after the fever. Min began writing them down, page after page, not out of fear, but to prove somehow that he still had a role to play, that memory was a task, not a trap. On the fourth evening, he heard Anne again. Not the echo from before, not the paper-thin replica, but her, clear, direct. "Ba?" He turned. "Anne?" Silence. Then, "I forgot what my face looks like." Min staggered to the mirror, looked hard at his own face, and realized he could not recall hers. He wept for hours, not because she was gone, but because the house was keeping her and erasing him. He dug beneath the floor that night, bare hands, no tools, until his nails broke, until mud filled his teeth, until his hands trembled from exhaustion. He dug not to find her, but to unbury her memory. What he found instead were dolls, crude, mud-caked, twisted with hair and cloth, some missing limbs,
some missing eyes, each with a name scratched into their stomachs. One of them bore Anne's name, another his own, and a third blank, waiting. Min understood then. The house wasn't only remembering, it was rebuilding, piece by piece, voice by voice, shape by shape, until every forgotten soul had a body to return to, even if it wasn't their own. He burned the dolls, not out of courage, but terror. The fire roared louder than it should have. The smoke turned yellow, and from within it, voices screamed, dozens, maybe hundreds, wailing, choking, accusing. You let us rot. You forgot the names. You left them burn us twice. Men collapsed. The smoke pressed into his skin like hands, but still he did not run. There was nowhere to run from memory. That night, the house whispered to him directly, not through floorboards, not through dreams, but through his own mouth. He felt his lips move without his will, and they said, "If you leave now, you take nothing. If you stay, you become everything." He did not respond, but the house took that as yes. The next day, he found a new photograph inside the altar drawer. This time, it was current, color, crisp. It showed the house, and inside the doorway, him, holding Anne's hand, smiling. But he didn't remember taking it, and in the photo, the walls were breathing. The village elder came that afternoon, unannounced, alone. He stood at the base of the hill, shouting up toward the house, voice cracking, hands trembling. "Min, come out now! That house will not stop. It never stops. It is not haunted. It is hungry." Min opened the door and stepped out. He did not walk toward the elder. He simply stood at the top of the stairs and said, "Then let it finish eating." The elder backed away slowly, eyes wide, mouth open, as if realizing Min was already gone. That night, dusk came early. The air turned heavy by noon. By mid-afternoon, the sky was the color of dried blood. And as the sun dipped low, the voices began again. But this time, they were not memories. They were instructions. Whispers in men's ears. Clean the walls. Turn over the bowls. Sleep facing the window. He obeyed without question. The house was no longer shelter. It was master, and he was becoming its tongue. Just before midnight, he sat beside the altar and whispered a question, one he hadn't dared ask until now. "What are you making me into?" No answer came, but the floor sighed, and the candles blew out on their own.
By now, Min no longer referred to it as the house. He called it her. Not aloud, never aloud, but in his mind, in that quiet place where grief roosts and names dissolve. Because whatever it had been before, wood, thatch, stilts, and shadow, it was now something closer to a body. And bodies remember, even when they don't want to.
Min walked differently now, softer, slower, as though the floor had nerves, as though any sudden movement might wake it too fast and cause it to breathe him in whole. Because the house was no longer waiting to be remembered. It was now remembering itself. It began with a name Min had never spoken, not in childhood, not in ritual, not in prayer. Yen, a name that came to him while washing his hands, whispered through the water, floating on steam. It struck like lightning, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was buried. Yen, his aunt, his mother's sister, the one they never talked about. She died before Min was born, in the house, during the war. A bombing, a fever, no one agreed on how. She was never buried. There was no body to burn, no bones to bury, only a shawl that smelled of wood smoke and wet rice, pressed into the altar drawer like apology. Min had heard her name once in a fight between elders, and then silence, until now. The next day, Min found a folded note beneath his mat, handwritten, smudged, not his handwriting. 3 words: Yen waits beneath. He didn't question where it came from. The house no longer needed to explain. He returned to the crawl space beneath the house. The stilts groaned as he descended. The mud was thick, sticky, like blood that had forgotten how to flow. And there, under the far corner, he saw it. A small hole in the earth. Not natural, not animal-made. Dug and resealed by human hands. He knelt, hands trembling, and opened it. What he found was not a skeleton, not bones, but a single braid of black hair, wrapped in white linen, still glossy, still soft, and beneath it a rusted pear-pin shaped like a lotus. He didn't cry. The house had already done that for him. That night, he placed the braid on the altar, lit 3 sticks of incense. Kneeling, he bowed low, forehead to floor, and whispered, "I remember now." The house exhaled, but not with violence. It wept. The sound came from the walls, not creaking, not wind, but a low, echoing sob, as though the bamboo itself had held its grief too long. Min whispered again, "You are not forgotten." And from somewhere behind the altar came a sigh of relief. But peace never lasts here, because remembering one meant remembering all. The following nights brought visions. Min no longer dreamed of his daughter or wife. He dreamed of others, women with their mouths sewn shut, men with no faces, children holding knives carved from bone. Each stood within the house. Each turned toward him and whispered a name. Some were relatives, some were not. Some spoke with tongues made of fire. Others didn't speak at all. They only opened their mouths wide and breathed in. Min began to feel it physically now. Each breath the house took made his ribs ache, as though he shared its lungs. His skin dried, cracked, flaked away like burnt offerings. He drank gallons of water, but always woke thirsty. He began to forget his name, not entirely, just the taste of it, as though it was a word the house had chewed up and swallowed. He tried to leave once, packed a small bag, stepped out the door, made it 10 steps down the stairs before the world tilted. The sky became bamboo, the ground became slats, the air turned thick, humid with voices. The entire world became the house, and the house whispered, "You live where you are remembered." He collapsed at the foot of the gate. Woke up hours later inside. Shoes gone, bag gone, another folded note placed on his chest. You were born here. Min stopped fighting. Instead, he started building. Small shrines, tiny altars, to those the house whispered into him. Some with names, others with only drawings, some with hair, some with teeth, one with his own photograph, burned at the edges, eyes scratched out. Each offering slowed the breathing, each memory fed the walls, and yet the hunger only deepened. One night, the house spoke again, but not through the floor or the wind. It used Min's own voice. He stood in the mirror, staring at himself, and heard himself say, "The body remembers what the blood forgets." He didn't flinch. He only nodded and whispered back, then let it flow. He took a knife from the kitchen, pressed it gently to the palm, and drew a line, thin, clean. He dripped the blood onto the floorboards, and the house inhaled. The floor creaked with pleasure. The walls rippled, and the voices sang, dozens of them, singing lullabies in languages long dead. Men collapsed, eyes open, smiling, because he finally understood. This was not possession. This was not a curse. It was inheritance. Min did not know how long it had been since the last sunrise. Time had bent backward. Memories had looped. He still ate, still breathed, still walked. But each motion felt like imitation, like he was acting out someone else's memory of being alive. And in the center of it all was An. She returned on the 13th night. Not from a door, not from the earth. She rose from the floor, through the bamboo, not breaking it, but emerging through it, as if the house had been keeping her between its breaths. Min opened his eyes, and she was there, standing at the foot of the altar, barefoot, silent, and older. Not in body, but in presence. "An," he whispered. She looked at him, and for a moment he thought he saw his daughter again. Soft eyes, warm face, lips twitching with the thought of a smile. But then she said, calmly, "I remember too much now." He wept, fell to his knees, tried to hold her, but her skin felt wrong, cool but not cold, solid but not still, like something remembered into being. She didn't pull away, but she didn't embrace him either. She simply placed one hand on his head, like blessing, like ritual. "It's almost time," she said. "The house is ready." That night,
She led Min in a circle around the altar, 7 times. She sang no song, only breathed, a slow, even breath that echoed from the walls, and the house breathed with her. The roof swelled, the windows stretched, the floor pulsed. The house was no longer a house. It had become lungs, and An was now its voice. She brought Min to the center of the main room, laid his hands on the floor, and whispered, "This is where it ends and begins." From the corners of the house, shadows emerged. They were not ghosts. They had no eyes, no mouths, only shapes, like memory unfinished. Some were tall, some walked on all fours. One dragged itself, whispering names into the floor as it moved, and Min recognized them. Not as people, but as guilt. Each was someone he had forgotten. A neighbor from childhood, a cousin who died too young, a child from a funeral he never attended. They were unfinished rituals come home. An turned to them, raised her arms, and the shadows knelt. Min whispered, "What do I do?" An answered, "Follow." He did. They descended through the center of the house, not through stairs, but through memory. The bamboo slats peeled open like petals. Below them, a tunnel spiraled down into darkness, carved not in earth, but in voice. Every inch of the wall hummed with names. Each step forward sank him deeper into air that smelled of burnt offerings and wet teeth. And at the end was a chamber, round, damp, echoing, like the womb of a god. At its center was a pit, filled not with dirt, but with ashes, thick, warm, breathing. As Min stepped toward it, the ashes shifted, and from them rose Lien, her body whole, her face serene, but her eyes entirely black, mirrors that reflected only regret. She did not speak. She only extended her hand. Min took it, and the moment he did, the house exhaled so hard it shook the mountains. Above, the stilts groaned, the rice terraces rippled, cattle cried in distant barns. Inside, the chamber filled with light, not from flame, but from memory. Images flashed across the ash. Min as a boy, kneeling at his grandmother's altar. Lien in her wedding dress, lighting incense for Min's father. An at 3 years old, naming the photo of a dead cousin she had never met. Forgotten names, forgotten hands, forgotten mouths still open beneath the floor. Then all was still. An turned to her father and said, "It has taken enough." "What do you mean?" "It is full." She smiled. And for a moment, she was just a girl again. Now it remembers itself. Min fell to his knees, and for the first time in years, felt peace. Because in that moment, he wasn't Min. He was every ancestor, every offering, every name spoken with trembling hands and smoky breath. He was the memory that would not die. The pit closed, the ashes sealed, the light dimmed. And when he awoke, he was alone. The house was quiet now. No breath, no moan, no whispers, only stillness.
as though it had finally slept. He found no trace of An, or Lien, or himself. The photos were gone, the dolls, the notes, the teeth, all gone. Only one thing remained: a new altar, freshly built. 3 names carved in wood: Nguyen Minh, Tran Lien, and Nguyen An. And beneath them, remembered fully, returned whole. He smiled and stepped outside.
The house no longer breathed, not in the way it once had. There were no creaks, no sighs, no shifting slats that mimicked lungs. Now there was only stillness, the kind that comes after something dies, or worse, finishes remembering. Min walked through her. Yes, her. The house was no longer it. Not after everything. Not after An. Not after the chamber. The house had lived, and now she waited. The light inside had changed too. No longer dusk, no longer gold, just gray. A dry, even gray that clung to the walls like ash that had learned to settle. The smell of incense no longer lingered. The smell of people had faded too. There was only the scent of closure, a kind of clean rot, like the final breath of something holy that had been buried beneath too many prayers. Min didn't eat anymore, didn't sleep. He no longer needed to. He had become a memory himself, light enough to float from room to room, but heavy enough to hold ritual on his shoulders. And he had one more left to complete. It was written, not in any book, not in the altar scrolls, but in the walls. The bamboo itself bore the shape of it, long vertical scars joined with diagonal slashes, not letters, not runes, but instructions. Min ran his fingers along them like a blind man reading by touch, and he understood. The final rite required a reversal. To remember someone into being, you must forget yourself. He lit the candles at the 4 corners, burned the last of the hair, the ash, the paper offerings. He poured tea over the altar one final time, not as a drink, but as a farewell. He dressed in white, and then, barefoot and silent, he stepped into the center of the house and waited. The house responded, not with sound, but with air. The floor rose beneath him, not like breath now, but like a tide, a swell, and then a holding. It did not inhale, it did not exhale, it simply held him, suspended, weightless, between remembering and release. And then he heard her voice. An, but not the An he knew, not the little girl who traced names in dust. This voice was older, richer, a voice that contained others inside it. Papa. Min did not speak. He didn't need to. She continued. The house is not cursed. It was just unfinished. You gave it what it needed, and now it's your turn. The bamboo began to fold inward, walls curling like fingers, ceiling dipping like a bowed head. Min closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. The house was no longer a vessel. It was becoming a womb, and Min, the final seed. Pain did not come, only warmth, like sinking into memory, like falling into a story you'd once forgotten you were part of. He felt his name peel away, his face blur.
His breath stretched thinner and thinner until there was only silence. And then the house exhaled, hard, for the first time in days, one final breath. Deep, long, complete. The slats cracked, the stilts groaned, the altar split down the center, and the whole house shuddered as if something inside it had finally found rest. Then, silence again. But this silence was different, not empty, full. The way earth is full just after the last shovel of soil is laid on a grave. The next morning, the villagers saw it. Smoke rising in a soft spiral. No fire, no ruin, just steam, like breath rising from skin. They climbed the path slowly. No one rushed. They already knew. The house was still standing, whole, untouched. But something was different in its bones. The door hung open. A breeze passed through. The air smelled of nothing. Inside, a new altar. Smaller, simpler, and 3 bowls, each filled with clear water. And beside them, carved into the wood with precision, were 3 names: Nguyen Minh, Tran Lien, Nguyen An. No photographs, no relics, only names. The head villager stepped inside. He bowed once, then whispered reverently. They finished it. Behind him, the others stayed outside. They didn't need to enter. They already felt the change. The house no longer breathed for the dead. She now slept. She had remembered everyone, and in doing so, had become something new. Not haunted, not holy, but whole.
They say the house is quiet now. Visitors who pass through the village sometimes hike up the trail to see it. The stilts are sturdy, the walls no longer creak. The roof has been rethatched by the villagers, though no one asked them to. And yet, no one stays long. They always leave before dusk. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Inside, everything remains untouched. The mats, the bowls, the altar. A small shrine sits in the center of the room, nothing elaborate, nothing ornate. 3 bowls of clear water, 3 sticks of unburnt incense, 3 names carved into bamboo: Nguyen Minh, Tran Lien, Nguyen An. No candle wax, no ash, no photos, just the names, and a silence that feels too complete to be called peace. But sometimes, if you arrive just as the sun begins to fall behind the rice terraces, in that narrow breath between light and shadow, you will hear it. A faint shift in the floorboards, a slow release of the walls. Not loud, not obvious, just a breath. Drawn in, held, let go. As if the house, old and tired and full, is still practicing what it was built to do: breathe. The villagers don't talk about what happened that year, not anymore. They have their own houses to tend to, their own ancestors to honor. But sometimes, when a baby is born sick, or when a name is forgotten too long, or when someone dreams of their grandmother and wakes weeping without knowing why, they make the walk. They climb the hill, they bow 3 times in front of the stilt house, and they whisper, "Help us remember." Because now they understand, some homes are not meant to shelter the living. Some homes are built to hold grief, to cradle names so they don't vanish,
to hold memory so deep that even silence cannot drown it. And when those homes are forgotten, when offerings go unlit, when the names fade from stone and mind, the house remembers anyway. She always does. They say sometimes if you stand at the threshold long enough, you'll hear children laughing, or a woman humming, or a man whispering a story you haven't told in years. And if you listen even longer, you'll hear your own name spoken back to you from somewhere underneath. Not to scare you, not to trap you, not to take, but to say, you were here, you mattered, you are remembered. And that's all the house ever wanted. So now she breathes, slowly, not in hunger, not in pain, but in ritual, because she is not haunted anymore. She is home.